Hey everybody, Dave here. Today we are going to be going over the conditionals group of actions in Power Automate Desktop. That's if statements and switch statements. I'm going to talk about some of the similarities and differences, show you some examples, go into some advanced stuff at the end. We'll use all of the operators and stuff like that. So if you are new to Power Automate Desktop or you just want to see some working examples, this is the video for you. The first thing I want to show you is that there is a little bit of an odd situation with the grouping of the actions. Conditionals, loops, and run flow, those three groups of actions, in my opinion, should be part of the flow control group. I don't think it's that big of a deal, but it is slightly strange. For example, the UI automation group has data extraction, form filling, windows, and then it has some basic actions that are directly under the UI automation group. I don't understand why Microsoft hasn't done that same thing for flow control, directing the flow to one place or another to do one action or another based upon certain situations and stuff. And the way that you do those conditions, the way that you determine whether or not to do one thing or another is with conditionals, if statements, and switch statements. Same thing with loops. In programming, loops and conditionals are part of flow control. I want you to think of them as all one group, these four: conditionals, loops, flow control, and run flow. That's how I look at it, and I think that it will help you probably better to find the actions you need if you think of it that way. So the whole concept of directing your flow into what it needs to do, when it does this and when it does that. But today we're only going to be talking about conditionals. Let me open up that group. You'll see that there are 6 actions, and that might appear to be a lot, but really there are only 2 actions in here. Let's start with looking basically at how an if statement works. So I'm going to actually bring over set variable. We're going to need that a few times. I'm just going to put something in there, and we are going to name our variable var. We'll put the value 1 in it for now, and then I need to pull over an if action. In the first operand, think of this as the variable that you're going to compare against. So you can certainly use it in different ways, but for now, just think of it like that, and let's put the name of our var so we can click here, and then we can select var. So var equals whatever. You can name it something else if you want to name this more specifically to make sense to you, but I need a generic variable. So var, and then the operator, which is equal to, not equal to, greater than, that kind of stuff. You also have contains in here. Later on in the video, we're going to go over all of those. For now, I'm just going to go with equal to 1, just to show you basically how it works right from the start. And then I need to do something inside of here. Otherwise, it's kind of hard to tell whether or not we met our condition. So let me bring over a custom form, display custom form, and go into custom form designer. I'm going to name this test message. I want to bring over a text block, and then let's change the text variable for now. Oops, we named it var. And then down over here, I want to change it to use size for the font to be extra large. The weight will be bolder, and the color good. None of that matters for this. I just want to be able to see something on the screen whenever one of the conditions is met. I'm going to save those. And now we're just going to test it real quick. So var is going to be set to 1 here, and then this should check to see if var equals 1. And since it does, it's going to run the action that's inside of the if statement. And there we go. We have our variable equals 1. Now, that is the most basic way to use it. But I think a lot of people probably can open it up and see that's what it does. But you might wonder, well, I mean, what else can I do with it? Why would I want to use this? So let's expand this a little bit and kind of use the use case of a sentence that we want to check for a certain word in. Let's change our variable to have a sentence in it, like the cow jumped over the moon. And then inside the if statement, we need to change this. We want to check the first operand, still going to be var, still going to be our variable. We want to see if it contains the word cow. And then we're going to set this to ignore case, meaning that even if cow had a capital C or it was in all caps, that wouldn't matter. I would recommend having ignore case on every time you do this, unless you specifically know why you want it off. I don't know why by default it's set to false. That's strange. But if it has a blue color and this little notch is on the right side, that means it's on. So I'm going to click save, and we'll run this just to make sure it works. Okay, variable cow jumped over the moon. So what I want to do actually, that doesn't tell me much. When I add more here, I want to be able to tell which one was met. So let me change this text to cow found. And then I'm going to add an else if to this if statement here, drop it right inside. And then we're going to use the same variable, var. Instead of equal to, we're changing to contains. And then here, let's say that we're checking for the word dog. Turn on ignore case. And then I'm going to copy this display form. And then I'm going to click on end so that when I Control V to paste, it's going to paste above. You might think you click here to paste below, but it doesn't work that way because I have no idea why. It doesn't make sense to me. Let's open up the custom form designer. I'm going to change the text block to have a text of dog found like this. And then let's go ahead and test it. So of course it's going to still run the first one, cow found. And the reason for that is that whenever you run an if else if statement, it's going to evaluate each if along the way. If you have 5 else ifs inside of here, then it's going to evaluate the first one, then the second one, then the third one. Something that I guess I should point out is that you don't put more ifs inside of here. So if you drag an if into here, it's going to do this. It's going to make like another if statement. Remember that if is how you start the statement. You don't add more into it. The way that you add more conditions is with else if. So if I need to do more, I could do else if and then more else if and just keep doing this downward as many as I need. For now though, I'm just going to be doing this one. And then the last action to deal with if statements is else. Drag this here. And the situation here, I think it's pretty obvious, is if it doesn't contain cow, if it doesn't contain dog, then do something down here. So let's go ahead and copy, paste. And I'm going to change the text in here again to this time say cow and dog not found. And then let's go up here and change our variable. I'm just going to change it to cat and run this. So it didn't find cow, it didn't find dog. So now it's saying cow and dog not found. I think we didn't actually test it to make sure it can find dog. So let's change this, run it. Okay, so we made sure that works. And this is the basic way to make an if statement. And again, you drag an else if in here. If you need to do more, you can check var contains something else like pig. We want contains, ignore case, save. And then you could, paste into here and do that. But I want to keep this kind of simple. And you could just add as many if else ifs as you need to. You only ever have one if and you only ever have one else. But you can have as many else ifs as you want. Let's do the same thing again, but let's do it with a switch statement. So let me actually do a little comment to separate this out. If, and then down here, we'll do switch. I'm going to use the same set variable. I'm going to paste it down here. And then we're going to do switch statement over on the left inside of conditionals. Let's bring switch over. Now the difference you'll see is that in the if, when you configured that, you actually put your variable and then you put your first expression or whatever. So it's trying to equal cow or something. In this though, you just pick your variable, var, and then we're going to go grab a case. So this case is like that expression in the if or the expression in else if. So we want to make sure it contains cow, ignore case. Let's go ahead and copy that and paste it again and do this for dog. And then just like in the if statement, you wanted to do an else. You want to grab a default case. And what this means is literally else. So if, this is how I like to read it. I'm going to switch what I do based upon the value of var. In the case that var variable contains cow, or in the case that the var variable contains dog, then do something. But if none of those are true, then do something by default down here. So let's copy the display custom form, paste it here. I'm going to copy the one for dog, paste it here, copy the one for else, and paste it here. Now I'm going to right click on set variable here. I'm going to run from here. And since I've left it as the dog jumped over the moon, it bypassed the case for cow and it went directly to case for dog. I want to show you now though that if you had both, and this actually applies for if statements as well, cow and dog jumped over the moon, it's going to evaluate cow first, then dog. And it doesn't actually matter what the order is. So let's just put like cow at the end of the sentence here. It's going to check the entire thing for cow and go here first. I'm going to run from here. And you see it evaluated cow, found cow inside of that text, even though it's way back here, and it ran this. It's not going to do this next case because just like an if statement, you are evaluating, and when one of them is true, that's all it does. Now let's say that neither of them are found. Cat, I'm going to delete this last part. Okay, so dog and cow are not inside of the sentence. I'm going to run from here. Okay, so it didn't find cow, didn't find dog. It did the default case, just like else. And then it displayed cow and dog not found. Now that we've used both if statements and switch statements, I think it's kind of obvious that they can do essentially the same thing. So when you try to decide which one to use, you should probably decide based upon readability. Maybe as a secondary factor, you consider how fast it runs. But in readability, what it comes down to is, let's say you have the name of a variable that is very, very long. You have like a 40 character variable name. Then an if statement in Power Automate Desktop is going to repeat it every single one of these if the variable contains whatever. So if I wanted to rename this to something like, I don't know, let's like rename it to have like a whole bunch of characters. Okay, it's a lot less readable for an if statement because it repeats it every time. But you go down to the switch statement and it has the variable name one time, and then it has this nice readable in the case that it contains dog. So there's maybe an example of when you'd want to use one or the other, but totally up to you. Doesn't make a difference which one you use as far as I'm concerned. I want to show you later in the video that there is no functionality difference between if statements and switch statements, even though you might think there is. All right, I'm going to go ahead and undo these changes that I just made. Oh my goodness. I didn't know that that was a thing. Okay, when you rename something, wait, what? This is shocking to me right now. I renamed a variable. I don't know what's happening right now. I'm very confused. It was like only changing this one. It's like the rename doesn't get put in the stack of recent changes. So when you do undo, it doesn't undo it. That's fine. We can rename this back to var. Wow, that is interesting. I love that you can refactor variables. You just right click on it and do rename. Anyway, let's go ahead and go to the next thing. In this next part, we are going to use all of the operators that are inside of if statements and switch statements. And I'm talking about this field right here where you can hit the drop down and then it's greater than, less than, contains, ends with, and all that. I'm going to use every single one of them. This might get a little bit old and you're going to hear me repeating the same things over and over again. And I apologize for that. I'm going to try to go as quickly as possible and I plan not to edit out any of it. So if you don't need me to show you how to use each of these, then skip this next part. I am going to go ahead and select. I'm going to left click this top comment up here. I'm going to scroll down and I'm holding shift and I'm going to left click on this end stage, Control X, and I'm going to go create a new flow, or I guess a new subflow, and then I'm going to paste it into here. So I wanted to keep all this logic, but I wanted it off the main sort of main flow. And what we're going to do now is use all of the operators for these. So let me go back over and we'll create a new one actually. Let's do set variable. We'll still use var as our variable name. I'm going to put 1 here for now. And then let's go back over to our conditionals group, bring over if. We'll use if var equals 1. And then what do we want to do? We want a little pop-up? I guess we want a pop-up. So let's do that. And then let's just change the message it gives us to condition met. And I want an else, so that in the case that we don't meet the condition, I still want it to pop up and say something. Condition not met. Okay, so we set up our test sort of. You know what I'll do is go ahead and use a switch statement as well. So let's do the same thing. Var. I don't want inside of here. I want it outside. And then let's grab default case. Oh, we want case first. Equal to 1. And then we want default case here. Let's copy this, paste to here, copy this, paste to here. Okay, so now we have mimicked the same functionality in both an if statement and a switch statement. We have an if and an else and a case and a default case. Same functionality, same sort of pop-ups, custom forms that we're going to use. And let's go ahead and run this and see what it looks like. It should go into this top one like that, and then we'll change the value and run it the other way. Okay, condition met, condition met. You know, I should probably change these so that it's a little more clear. We're going to do if condition met. Go into here, and then if condition not me. That's not what I wanted. Not met. And then in the switch statement part, I want to change this to switch condition met. So we're going to be clicking run a whole bunch of times, and I want this to be obvious what ran and what did not run. Switch condition not met. Okay, let's run it one time through. If condition was met, I'm going to close that. Switch condition met. Okay, now let's change it so that neither of them get met. We'll change this to 0. Okay, it went into the else, if condition not met. And then the case 1 was not, and then the default case here ran, so it did switch condition not met. All right, now let's go ahead and for the next few minutes, like I said, I'm going to change the condition or the operator for each of these, and I'm going to try to go rather quickly and not explain too much. Let's see if I succeed on that. So let's change the if to be not equal to 1, and the switch case to not equal to. Since the variable is going to get set to 0, and we are checking to see if it's not equal to 1, both of these should be met. If condition was met, and switch condition was met. Now let's go change this to greater than. So save greater than. So 0 is not greater than 1, so both of these should go into the not met. Let's change it to something that will get met. 3 is greater than 1, so both of these should go into the if state, if condition met, and switch condition met. Now let's change to greater than or equal to, and we don't have to change the value for this because 3 is greater than or equal to 1. Met, met, but I'm going to change the value to 1, just make sure that the equal to part works. So 1 is greater than or equal to 1. Yep. Okay. And I'm not always going to do this, but now and then I want to test the else side of things. Condition not met, because 0 is not greater than or equal to 1 in both of those. Now let's change var less than 1, and var is less than 1. Let's run this. So 0 is less than 1, so both of these should be met. both of them were. And then let's change to less than or equal to. Okay, 0 is less than or equal to 1. 0 is less than or equal to 1. Now let's change this to contains. Now this is the fun part. I think what we just did was not that hard. It's kind of, greater than or equal to, greater than, like that stuff's pretty easy. Let's do contains though. Okay, and what we want now is text. Here we'll do the cow jumped over the moon. And then what we're checking for is contains. Let's make it ignore case. We're going to see if it contains cow. And same thing for here, contains, ignore case. Check to see if it contains cow. And actually we'll make this one have a capital O here just to make sure that works properly. Both of these should be condition met. It was. And then what we want to do now is change to not contains, or I guess does not contain. We'll run this and just make sure that both of them go to condition not met, because both of them are checking for the word cow. And because the word cow is in it, and they're specifically checking for it to not be in there, it's like a hard thing to think through, but it's reversing the logic. So because it does not contain it, and we are checking for it to not contain it, this comes out to be false. And because it comes out to be false, it goes down on this path. Now let's check for, let's see, let's remove the word cow, change it to dog. Okay, now the dog jumped over the moon, and we're going to check to make sure that this sentence does not contain the word cow. If it does not contain the word cow, then we'll display this custom form. Same thing down here. If it does not contain the word cow, ignore case, then it will run this. Okay, so the condition was met here, just like we thought, and this condition was met too. Let's change to is empty. So in this case, we already know that, of course, it is not empty. So we won't even go into this path, but let's go ahead and test it. So what we're looking for is it empty or not? And usually the reason you'll do that is you want to verify whether or not to actually perform some operation. So let's say that we were going to verify that some piece of text, that it has some value before we do something with it. Or in some cases, maybe we want to fill the value if it doesn't have one already. Then that would be the purpose of going, oh, is it empty? Okay, well, let's go ahead and fill the value. If it's not empty, then we still want to do something with it, but we're doing something different. We're not just filling it. Maybe you append versus overwrite or something like that. Now let's check is not empty. Oh, you know what? Let's go ahead and check this. Let's delete. Will it let me set an empty value? Okay. How do we, can I do, okay, that's not empty though. Let's do, will that work? So what I'm hoping this does, oh, okay, it changed to single quotes. So I guess if you put two single quotes next to each other, let me spread this out so you can see. Actually, I need to take that space out. You put two single quotes inside of these percent symbols, then it is evaluating what's in here, and it's basically giving me empty text. So this should come out to be true for both of these. Yep. Cool. And there's other ways to reproduce that, but I figured that might be the easiest. Let's change this to check isn't empty or is not empty. That's interesting. They have isn't empty, and then they have does not contain. Like they used a contraction here, but they didn't use a contraction here. That's weird. Okay, isn't empty. So because we're checking if it isn't empty, then this is going to be false. So both of these are going to go on the second paths. Okay, condition not met. Condition not met. Now we can change this back to have some text. The cow jumped over the moon. And when we run this, because we are checking to see if it isn't empty, that means it is filled. It does have a value. We'll run on these first paths. Next, we have starts with. So does it start with some value? First, we'll go ahead and just put cow to make sure that it works properly. We always want to do a negative test to make sure, now granted, not this entire time I haven't done negative tests for everything, but usually you want to make sure to test that the incorrect situation is handled properly. So this is an incorrect situation. So like, does it start with the word cow? No, it does not. Okay, well, it should not go into this part of the path. It should go this part. Okay, worked there, and it worked correctly there. Now, though, let's say that we want to make sure it can find the first word of the sentence because we're looking to see, does this value start with the word the, let's say. Okay, let's change it to the. And the, we'll put a capital H in here. That looks pretty weird, but okay, so it should be true for both. Yep, it was. And then let's go to doesn't start with. Okay, so go ahead and leave that and doesn't start with. So this should both be false because it does start with true. Or I'm sorry, it does start with true. It does start with the. Okay, so that's correct. Now we want to change the sentence. Do we want to change the sentence? Let's see. Doesn't start with. We'll do cow. So we want to make sure that it doesn't start with the word cow. We'll put it in all caps there. Okay, it's correct. It does not start with the word cow. And doesn't start with the word cow. Now let's do ends with. We'll go ahead and leave it as cow. Ends with. Leave that as cow. Run it, and it should be false for both of them. Okay. And then let's go to the last. Oh, no, not the last one. We want to positively check this. So let's go with, let's make sure that it ends with a period. Obviously, ignore case is going to be a little unnecessary here because there's no capital version of a period. Both of these should be true because it does end with a period. And then I think our last one is next, which is doesn't end with. We'll leave the period there for now to do our negative tests. Run. Okay, so it's false because it does end with a period. Does end with a period. And then we will, let's see, we want to check, we want to get a true out of this, so it doesn't end with a period, meaning that we should change this to, I don't know, let's put like parentheses around it. And now what we've done is make it so that the text does not end with a period. So it should be true. Yep. And then true. Cool. So that is all of the operators. They're not that hard to work with, but it is really good to try them all. So if you watched me do it and you haven't actually tried all of these, it is a great idea to just do it. I guarantee that that helps internalize it in your brain so you're ready for it whenever you need it on the job. It is, you know, the time when you want to do a thing is not the time to learn about it. There are some situations where you need a use case to come up before you really can go try out the thing, and that's perfectly fine. But I mean that in these simple examples, the basics, foundations of how to use Power Automate Desktop, those are things you can practice in advance and have them ready to go whenever you need them. I want to show you now a simple example of using if statements and switch statements, kind of like a real world example. So what I'm about to show is nothing new. I've already shown this stuff in the video, but let's go ahead and move this stuff to our subflow over here. And then I want to go back over, and now I'm going to work on, let's see, this is going to be simple examples. For the example for an if statement, I want to bring up something that I think probably anyone and everyone is going to run into if they haven't already run into it. It depends on the language that you natively speak or the language that you're working with. I don't know of a way to do this directly in an expression, so I'm just going to show you using an if statement. Let's go get an if. Let's see. Actually, I need to set the number of apples first. So we'll create a variable called number of apples. Let's set this to 2. And then let's use another set variable, actually. We'll call this result. We have number of apples. So that's a variable reference right here because it's got percents around it. So it'll replace that. We have 3 apples. Okay. So I could do this. And then let's grab a, whoops, I didn't mean to do that. Let's go grab this, paste it here, and I'm going to change the text that it uses to be, what was the name of my variable? Result. Okay. Now, when I run this, it's going to set the number of apples to 2. Then it's going to create a variable called results with a value that is we have, and then it's going to take the number of apples from the variable, put it into the text, and then put apples at the end. So I'll run this and it'll pop up on the screen and it's a good English sentence. We have 2 apples. And that's great. But what happens if we have 1 apple? Now suddenly it's like, that's a little weird. We have 1 apples. Like, I mean, yeah, you could just do that, but it's lazy programming, in my opinion. You really should try to handle that if you're going to create a normal English sentence. Now you can get around this. You could change it to do this. We have the following number of apples. Okay. We have the following number of apples. 1. Yeah, that's not terrible, but nobody talks like that. If somebody walked up to me and said, the following is the number of apples I have, 1, I would be concerned that we have advanced so far in robotics and AI that now one is walking around talking to me. That doesn't matter if you have like an automation that is, sending an email and it words it like that. Nothing wrong with it. But if you wanted it to be worded more fluently, then we have some number of apples. And this is fine too, but let's say we want it to have an S or not have an S at the end of apple, depending on whether or not the number is 1. So if it's 0 or 2 or more, then we want it to have an S. So let's use an if statement to make that happen. We want it to be right here. So if number of apples is equal to 1, then we will go, we have 1 apple, because we can hard code it because we know that it's going to be equal to 1. Actually, we could even type it like this. We have 1 apple. Is that how you spell apple? I've said the word so many times now that doesn't look. Is that the word apple? Do you ever do that? You ever like say a word so many times you're like, I don't feel like that's real anymore. Let's actually change this to 0. Because it occurs to me that what we could do is word it as we have no apples. Then let's add an else if. We still want to look at the number of apples. If it's equal to 1, then we will copy there, paste here. Let's change it to we have 1 apple. I guess I could just pass through the variable, but I'll just leave it like that. And then we want an else. Okay, if it's anything else, then we will set the value to we have, and then put our variable number of apples. Okay, so let's say that we have 0 apples. We have no apples. Now let's say that we have 1 apple. We have 1 apple. And let's say that we have 50 apples. It should say we have 50 apples. So this is kind of a lot of actions in a row to accomplish such a simple thing. And maybe I've just missed it, but I don't think there is any like single expression you can do to make this possible, to change what it says in Power Automate Desktop. Like in Excel, you can do if statements inside of an expression. Maybe that exists in Power Automate, but I don't know. Either way, though, I think this proves one way that you can use it and the concept. Now, while we're at it, let's go ahead and do a switch statement for the same thing and show you that that is also possible. So we're checking the number of apples. We'll go ahead and skip to making our switch statement designed just like our if statement. So let's grab case is going to be equal to 0. We'll copy this set variable, paste it under, grab another case equal to 1. We'll go grab this, assign result to be we have 1 apple. Grab another case. Nope, we just need default case. Default case is the same thing as else. We'll just copy this set variable here. And then we'll copy this display form, paste it down here and move it down. And then I'm just going to run from here. Actually, that's not going to work, is it? Let's copy this, paste it up here. So now we've duplicated all the logic from the if statement, but instead made it a switch statement now. So I'm going to right click here and go run from here. All right, we have 50 apples. We need to test the others though. So let's do 1. Run from here. We have 1 apple. And then let's change it to 0. Run from here. We have no apples. Look at that. So now, that's, as I said, it's very simple examples, but I think that it really shows what you can do. This is another situation where you decide, should I use an if statement or a switch statement? And I don't really think it matters in this case. It makes no difference whatsoever. This could be days of the week, or it could be months of the year for these different options, these different cases, and it would not really matter which one you do. Last, we are going to do some more advanced examples. I don't know if it's so much examples as playing around with the syntax that you can do inside of if statements and switch statements. And I want to show you, at first I didn't realize it was possible that you can basically do everything in a switch statement that you can do in an if statement. I thought that, you have switch number of apples. That means you're dealing with just one variable. Whereas an if statement could technically work with multiple variables. You could have number of apples equals 0 up here and whatever else. You could do tons of stuff up here, which I'm about to show you. But you can do the same thing with switch statements. So I'm going to show you both of those now. Let's get this stuff out of the way though. I'm going to hit Control A, Control X, click over here. I'm just going to go to the bottom and paste and then drag them out of there. Okay, so just to back up my stuff there. All right, now we got a clean canvas. Let's start by getting set variable. We'll use var as our variable name, and then I'm going to type the cow jumped over the moon. Now let's get an if statement, and what we want to check is something more complicated than this, actually. So let's say that a sentence has 2 different words that you want to check for. So let me go back over to the example from before we did this. So we just checked originally, does it contain cow? Does it contain dog? Does it not contain either of those? What I want to check for now is I want to run a particular part of the flow if it contains both the word dog and the word cow. The way we do that is like this. So we start with % symbols around everything. So inside of that, we are going to do some comparisons. So what we want to do is contains, I think is the name of the function. Contains, like this. We're going to see if something is true for the variable. And we want to check another thing. So it contains, we want to check that it contains something and that it contains something else. Right here. Syntax is pretty simple. Contains, we're going to do var. So this is the variable that we're looking inside of. Does it contain, I'm going to put single quotes around the word cow. And then the last one I'm just going to put is the ignore case. I wonder if I can leave that out. Let's find out. So contains var, comma, and then single quotes, we're putting dog. So what we want to do is find out, let's make sure this works first, because I might have to put the ignore case part. That's cool. Is it going to work? Let's just change this to condition met. Let's just see here. Okay, condition was met. Cool. I wasn't sure if I needed to put the ignore case. So when you look up the function for contains in PAD or Power Automate Desktop, you have three arguments. So contains, what variable do you want to look in? What text do you want to look for inside of that? And then do you want to ignore case or not? And so you would put like, false, oh wait, true ignore, is that? I think it might be case sensitivity. Let's see. True. And then let's do cow in uppercase. So this should come out to false. So it shouldn't run. Oh, it did. Oh, wait. It says ignore case. Oh, okay. So it is for the ignore case setting. So it's not case sensitive, true or false. Okay. So what I want is, if I were to want to make sure that the case matches, then I'd do false here. Okay, cool. So it didn't run this. Let's change this. Actually, we can leave, we'll do cow like that. I'll change this back to not use it at all. I am curious what it does by default though. If I do capital letter cow, by default, it is case insensitive. Cool. So that makes the function a little bit easier. Inside of these percent symbols, you do contains, the variable you want to look in, the text you're looking for, and that will come out to true or false. So let's say it finds it, and that's true. So this is saying, and this other thing also needs to be true in order for the entire thing to evaluate to true. So that it would basically resolve it to true. And then true does equal true. And because it equals true, it'll go in and run here. I will put a link to this web page in the description, but you could just Google something like use variables and the percent notation or whatever, and Power Automate Desktop. And this is the documentation you can look at for how to do all of this stuff. And in particular, things like these functions, we got starts with, not starts with, ends with, contains, not contains. And those are a lot of, if not all of, the same operators that we used over here when we hit this drop down. So you could choose to just do equal to true, and then you could write your own complicated syntax here, however you need to. Now, I want to show you that you can do the same thing for a switch statement. And I just didn't realize this was possible at first. So I'm going to do a switch, choose var and case. And at this point, I'm thinking, how in the world do I replicate this same functionality up here? Because I'm checking the value of var here equal to something. And that's when I realized, like, oh, well, I just need to click save. I'm going to change value to check to be true. And then in here, let's just go copy this logic. Paste it. Okay, so what we're saying is, this is so weird. Normally you'd think of it as switch on the value of this, but that's not really what you're doing. You're going, pick a path based upon which one matches this and go in order. So it's going to check this one. And if you had case, default case, it checks them in order. So it's going to evaluate this and say, does this variable contain cow, and does this variable contain dog? So I'll run this, and let's actually just disable these. What? Okay, it's inside. very strange. I should be able to disable this. Okay. Let me copy, paste it down here, enable this. Okay. So we'll set the variable to the cow and dog jumping over the moon. And then we are switching. We're trying to find a case that equals true. And we'll see if this one does. And it does. So that proves that, as far as I can tell, there is effectively no functionality difference between switch statements and if statements inside of Power Automate Desktop, because you can do complicated comparisons. You just have to do it kind of weird. And I do not think this is the play. Like I can't think of any reason you would want to do this. It is much easier, in my opinion, to read this. Even actually, that's kind of hard to read. But if this is true, then do this stuff. Whereas like this is like, okay, true case equal what? So probably you want to use the if statement for this, but I just wanted to point out you could do this kind of stuff with a switch statement as well. I hope this has helped. I've gone over everything that I can think of that is necessary for you to be able to, move on using if statements and switch statements. I don't think that you really needed all of this, but I feel like I have to make a full kind of comprehensive video on any topic that I make. And that's also why it took me forever to finally make this. I tried to record it over and over again, and I just couldn't get myself to finish the recording because I kept going, people don't need to know this, or, oh, but I'm leaving out that, or wait, why? So hopefully this works. And I think that all the rest of the action groups are going to be much easier for me because those kind of have specific things I already know I should go over. But this one was hard for me to think about what I wanted to what information I want to deliver. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.